Thank you so much for viewing this presentation on Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakura's Sri Madhurya Kadambini, the Monsoon Clouds of Sweetness. We will continue with the first section of the book, wherein the Superexcellence of Devotion is discussed, and we'll begin by looking at the pitfalls of the paths of karma and jnana. And we find here that although other spiritual practices need the help of bhakti in order that the practitioner attain perfection, bhakti has no need of help from any other discipline. In fact, bhakti infuses karma, jnana, and yoga with life. Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura writes in his Madhurya Kadambini, "There are many rules and prohibitions in karma yoga, and even the slightest fault in its performance can produce very harmful results, as stated." Visvanatha proceeds to quote the great Sridhar Swami's commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. If a mantra is incomplete, mispronounced in either its vowels or consonants, or chanted at the wrong moment, then its meaning is changed. Such errors can be as dangerous as a thunderbolt and destroy the sacrificer, just as Twasta's mispronunciation of the words Indra Satro led to disaster. Visvanatha's commentary continues. Similarly, it is well known that the practice of jnana yoga is dependent on one's purity of heart. One can attain such purity and thus become eligible to engage in jnana yoga through performance of karma yoga with detachment. Jnana yoga is therefore dependent on karma yoga. However, if one eligible for the path of knowledge accidentally commits even a small unworthy act, then he is defamed as a shameless vomit eater. Thus it is seen that Kamsa, Hiranyakasipu, and Ravana, though all engaged in the culture of knowledge, were still condemned by everyone because of their conduct. So the general course of practice is that one takes to the path of karma kanda, employing the rules and regulations of the varnashram system in order to purify themselves and gradually engage in activities on the material plane without any desire for enjoyment of the fruits of those actions. That's called niskama karma yoga. And through such a practice, the heart becomes pure and one becomes qualified to engage in the practice of jnana yoga, or the practice of philosophical inquiry into the nature of being, or the nature of oneself. This practice of jnana yoga, though, is very strict in its discipline, as we will find out in today's discussion. Now, three practitioners of such jnana were Hiranyakasipu, Kamsa, and Ravana. And although they were all successful to some extent or another, attaining great wealth, power, and kingdoms within the material world, they were all condemned due to their unworthy acts, and ultimately they were failures. So they were on the path, and they were, from a material viewpoint, all successful. Still, they all fell down due to fault. This pastime of Vitrasura is referred to by Sridhar Swami as evidence of the epistemological validity of the Srimad Bhagavatam in a verse quoted in his Bhagavat commentary, Bhavartha Dipika. Now this narration is found in the 6th canto and it weaves through many chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam and many narrations, and we will just go through it, and we will just provide an overview of the pastime that speaks to the nature of engagement in sacrificial performances and how the smallest fault by a practitioner can lead to a reversal in the desired result. The 6th canto narration of the killing of Vritrasura illustrates the consequence of even the slightest mistakes on the path of karma. Indra, the king of the demigods, was once seated with his wife Sachi Devi, and he was being praised by the various demigods, like the Siddhas, the Charnas, and the Gandharvas. Brihaspati, the spiritual master of the demigods, entered this exalted assembly. Unfortunately, Indra was so absorbed in his material opulence that he forgot himself, and he didn't offer proper respect to Brihaspati, his spiritual master. Brihaspati, upon seeing that, became aware of Indra's pride in his material opulence and position, and he immediately disappeared from the assembly. Indra noticed this. He became most repentant. He himself left the palace in search of Brihaspati so that he could beg pardon from his spiritual master for his grievous offense. But he could nowhere find Brihaspati. Just as the demigods have their spiritual master, the demons also have theirs. And theirs is Sukracharya, and he became aware of the situation with Indra and Indra's offense to Brihaspati. Therefore, he instructed the demons that the demigods were weakened by this offense and that they could attack and take advantage of the situation. This they did. Because of it, Indra lost all of his opulence, his throne, and his kingdom was conquered by the demons, who defeated him along with all the demigods in a great battle. The demigods, as a consequence, went to Lord Brahma to seek counsel as to what could be done. King Indra, along with the other demigods, later took shelter of Lord Brahma. Understanding the situation, Lord Brahma chastised the demigods for their offense to their spiritual master. Following Lord Brahma's orders, the demigods accepted Visvarupa, who was a Brahmana and the son of Twasta, as their priest. Then they performed yajnas under the priesthood of Visvarupa and were able to conquer the demons. Visvarupa described the glories of the Narayan Kuvacha to Indra, and thus the king of heaven recaptured his throne after being victorious over the soldiers of the demons. Because of affection for the demons, Visvarupa secretly supplied them some remnants of yajna. When Indra learned about this, he beheaded Visvarupa, but later regretted killing him because Visvarupa was a Brahmana. Although Indra was competent to neutralize the sinful reactions for killing a Brahmin, he did not do so. Rather, he accepted those reactions. Later, he distributed these reactions among the land, the water, trees, and women in general. Twasta, Visvarupa's father, performed a sacrifice in order to kill King Indra and thereby avenge the death of his son. He chanted the mantra, Indra Satro Vivar Dasva. O enemy of Indra, grow in power. and he was hoping that there would be a sufficient enemy created from the sacrificial fire that would be able to avenge the death of his son. This enemy was Vritrasura. Unfortunately, Twasta's mispronunciation of the mantra led to Indra's growth in power. Being pleased with the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead advised them to approach Dadichi to beg him for the bones of his own body. Dadichi would comply with the request of the demigods, and with the help of his bones, Vritrasura could be killed. Vritrasura had formerly been of the name Chitraketu, and Chitraketu had become a great devotee by the grace of Angira and Narada Muni after he realized that the material opulence of a son was of no lasting value. Once he'd become a great devotee, he made a joke with Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva's partner, Parvati, was not very amused, and she cursed Chitraketu, and Chitraketu accepted her curse and became this demon Vritrasura. So all this is a great play in the storyline of the Bhagavat Purana, teaching us so many lessons on the nature of involvement in material activities and gaining freedom from those activities through pure spiritual devotion. In the Gita, Krishna instructs Arjuna, the process of karma yoga is considered a necessary prerequisite for Jnana yoga. Krishna says there, O Arjuna, always do your duties without desiring the fruits. A person who performs such duties without attachment is purified and attains the qualities necessary for cultivating jnana. Finally, he attains liberation, which is the goal of the jnani. Also, we find in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, an illiterate person says Visnaya, while a learned person correctly says Vishnave. Both get the same result, since the Lord takes only the intention into account. So we can see from this verse, the Lord appreciates the illiterate devotee's feelings of devotion and his intent to please, even though such a devotee may utter his prayers incorrectly. Unfortunately, Vedic sacrifices have to be performed in a very perfect way to a state of mechanical precision, and so a flaw in their performance gives a flawed result. We'll now begin another subject and carry this on into the next presentation. Material desires are not unsurpassable. We're still in this section on the super-excellence of devotion. As long as selfish desires exist, the successful practice of jnana or yoga is impossible. Jnanis and yogis are condemned by the slightest unworthy act, and their eventual downfall is inevitable. Under the shelter of most pure and autonomous bhakti, no devotee is condemned despite engaging in sinful or even criminal activities. Bhakti bestows her mercy and ultimately gives him divine prema. Vishwanath writes, although lust is also considered a fault on the path of bhakti, one can still enter the devotional path despite still being afflicted by it and other material desires. The Bhagavatam says, whoever faithfully hears and narrates the loving pastimes of Sri Krishna with the ladies of Raj, attains the topmost devotion for the Lord, then swiftly becomes steady and conquers over the senses, giving up lust, the disease of the heart. We notice here, the verse reads, whoever faithfully hears and narrates the loving pastimes of Sri Krishna with the ladies of Raj first attains the topmost devotion for the Lord, followed by, then swiftly becomes steady and conquers over the senses, giving up lust, the disease of the heart. Thus it is clearly established that the symptoms of topmost loving devotion are already present even while lust has not yet been conquered. Srila Sanatana Goswami, in his Vaisnava Tosani commentary to this verse, writes, our normal expectation is that the heart would need to first be cleansed of its impurities before one could attain the topmost devotion. Since that order is reversed here, it is being announced to us that hearing or describing the Rasa Leela is a supremely powerful spiritual activity. Viswanath continues, in this text the word pratilabdhya, attained, is a gerund, indicating that one's attaining devotion precedes one's becoming steady. In other words, the topmost devotion first enters the aspiring devotees despite his having the disease of the heart. Then, in its supremely autonomous manner, it subsequently removes his lusty desires. We will go into this in great detail in our next presentation. Until then, I want to sincerely thank you for taking your time to view this presentation on Sri Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Ṭhakura, and hope that you will return to future presentations for spiritual nourishment. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.